Thanks to everyone for joining us today on PureBridge's Parcel Performance webinar. It's a series of webinars that PureBridge is doing to help shippers reduce shipping costs, improve customer experience, and really turn shipping into a competitive advantage. Our topic today is 2019 regulated shipping, the regulatory changes shipping pros need to know, and how technology can bridge that gap. We're going to take an in-depth look at dangerous goods 2019 regulatory changes and how the key factors you need to know to stay compliant and cost efficient when you are shipping hazardous goods. My name is Scott Moore. I'm the VP of Marketing here at PureBridge, and I'll be your host for the day. We're joined, thankfully, by our technology partner, LabelMaster, the real experts in hazardous goods and handling dangerous goods. And here's what you're going to learn in today's webinar. What exactly are dangerous goods? And I think it's a lot broader than a lot of people think. What are the changes to Hazmat, dangerous goods shipping regulations in the US? And how technology can make regulated shipping as easy as non-regulated shipping. Before we jump into the material, I just want to introduce our two experts today. Our first speaker is Brian Beetz. He's the Manager of Regulatory Affairs and Corporate Responsibility at LabelMaster. He has over 20 years experience in the hazard communication, environmental, and health and safety sectors, and extensive training in safe and secure domestic and international dangerous goods transportation regulations. Our second speaker is from PureBridge, Mike Graves. He's a Director of Product Management and Strategy and has over 25 years experience in solution architecture for logistics and supply chain software and technology. And at PureBridge, he leads the design and development of our TransStream enterprise parcel shipping software. Just a little bit of housekeeping quickly before I turn things over to Brian and Mike. We'll be sharing a recorded version of this webinar to everyone typically about a week after the presentation itself. And if you email someone from PureBridge, we can also provide you with a copy of the deck itself. On the right-hand side, you'll see there's a questions panel. That's where you can submit your questions. We'll be monitoring that throughout the presentation. And if there's a need to stop, we'll ask the question right away. If not, we'll save them to the end, and we'll do a little Q&A at the end. So thanks again for joining us, and I'll just turn it over to Brian.
Thank you, Scott. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. So the first thing that I want to touch on is briefly just what exactly are dangerous goods. The infographic here on the left shows the full technical definition that DOT defines as dangerous goods or hazardous materials, which I won't read verbatim, but it's essentially any substance that poses an unreasonable risk to human health and safety and/or the environment. So your most commonly identified items that the random person that isn't associated with hazardous materials can easily recognize are things like gasoline and crude oil, solvents, which are examples of Class 3 flammable liquids, acids like sulfuric acid, battery acid that are your Class 8 corrosives, and flammable gases like propane, natural gas, methane, hydrogen, things like that. So these are things that people recognize that are fairly dangerous and that would have transportation requirements associated with them. However, the items on the right are some things that you wouldn't necessarily maybe think have transportation requirements, because these are things at a consumer level that we're all used to picking up on a daily basis at the gas station, convenience store, grocery store, picking up items like perfume, hand sanitizer, cleaners like bleach, and even lithium batteries. So all of these are considered dangerous goods in transportation depending on the quantity that's being shipped, the size of the shipment, mode of transportation, etc. And with that have specific marking, labeling, and packaging requirements. Lithium batteries is one thing that's on this list that the regulations are constantly changing, and that's because of the technology changes that are constantly happening with lithium batteries, where they're changing the battery chemistries and densities, power capacities, things like that. The next thing that I'd like to cover is just kind of a general overview of the major regulatory changes that occurred over the past year between 2018 and 2019. And here, as we see, as I just mentioned, lithium batteries specifically had a pretty major change that was related to the labels and markings that are required on those packages. So what was referred to as the lithium battery handling label, that's in the upper left, that has the X through it because it's now obsolete, was previously used on what are considered small, or what they call accepted shipments of lithium batteries, things like your cell phone batteries, laptop batteries, small power tool batteries. And the change originated a little over 2 years ago, and at the international level, specifically at the UN, the United Nations, which is where all of the international regulatory changes originate. They decided that there needed to be some improvements to make the hazards more clearly and easily identifiable. So what they came up with was the label image to the right, where they increased the width of the red hatching to make it stand out a little more, increased the size of the battery grouping image with the flame icon, and just in general eliminated the majority of the text, and it now displays the UN number that's specific to the type of lithium battery that's being shipped. And so like I said, this was implemented a little over 2 years ago. There was a 2-year grace period where either one could be used, and that grace period ended at the end of the year, and now the marking label in the upper right is mandatory. At the same time, we had the introduction of the new Class 9 lithium battery specific hazard class label, and that's shown in the bottom right. That was also introduced 2 years ago and had a 2-year transition period, and is now mandatory for all fully regulated lithium battery shipments. And those are your larger quantities of batteries, more powerful batteries, e-bikes, batteries, automotive batteries that are lithium batteries, things like that. The next major change that we saw this past year was related specifically to hazardous waste shippers, and that was when the EPA rolled out a new change to the hazardous waste manifest form, and it was as part of their the rollout of the new e-manifest, or electronic manifest system that started on June 30th. So the goal of this system is to eventually completely eliminate all paper manifests and have a totally electronic system. But in the meantime, shippers that are still using paper manifests had to start using the new version of the form that they implemented, which was pretty significant because they hadn't made a change to that form in probably 10 or 15 years prior to that. And that covers really, I mean, the highlight of the major changes that occurred between 2018 and 19. In general, there weren't a lot of changes, and that had to do with kind of the general regulatory freeze that's still in place with the current White House administration. But we do have some pretty significant changes that are going to be rolled out later on this year. And that has to do specifically with the DOT PHMSA harmonization rulemaking. And what happens is approximately every 2 years, the United States harmonizes with the international standards that have already been implemented. And that was introduced in the docket that's specifically referred to as HM 215.0. So the goal is ultimately to harmonize the regulations to be consistent across the globe to help facilitate transport of materials seamlessly that originate from the United States and travel internationally, or are imported, as well as just simply travel through the United States. But not all of the changes are implemented verbatim. What happens is the Department of Transportation, they review and evaluate each of those amendments, and they want to determine what the overall impact is going to be on transportation safety in the United States, and they also take into account the economic impact that might happen that's associated with adopting that regulation. So the goal is always to harmonize without diminishing the level of safety, but also not to impose too many undue or unnecessary burdens on the regulated community. And we do anticipate seeing quite a few regulatory changes. There were quite a few new UN numbers and proper shipping names that were adopted internationally. And that changes how commodities can be are classified. So it can also significantly change the marking, labeling, and even packaging requirements that somebody might be used to shipping. So you might ask yourself, how in the world do you stay on top of all these complicated regulatory changes? And I can tell you from my own personal experience, it's not easy. I deal with it every day, and it's not easy. The Hazmat regulations in the United States, the 49 CFR is over 1,200 pages long. And knowing that any one of those regulations could change at any time, that can be a little bit daunting. But luckily for you, there's technology that keeps up with all those changes for you, and Label Master maintains a pretty incredible software we call DGIS. Pretty powerful tool, and it will validate your shipment for you. So we stay on top of all those regulatory changes, incorporate them into the software ahead of time before they become mandatory, and the shipment is validated against that, so you don't have to worry about it. And so it ultimately improves the efficiency and reduces the cost of your shipments. You can incorporate things like electronic signatures, templates that can be used over and over again. And a pretty cool feature that I think is really helpful is at the end, it also displays a diagram specifically showing you exactly what the packaging should look like. So not only is it validating your shipment against the regulations, ensuring that it's in compliance, validating your shipping papers, but it's also displaying a diagram showing you exactly what needs to be displayed on the exterior of the package to be in compliance. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike Graves from PeerBridge, and he can further explain the integration of DGIS into the PeerBridge stream system.
Thanks, Brian. Good afternoon, everyone. I apologize in advance. Got a little bit of a cold, so if I'm coughing a bit, I apologize, and I'll get through it. But yeah, so the nice thing about TransStream and the DGIS partnership is that at the time of shipping, or even at a ship request upstream, we can now integrate and try to help facilitate that workflow within your organization. So the TransStream product itself is focused around, obviously reducing your costs and optimizing your shipping. So we have tools like rate shopping, the ability to modify and customize a solution in a way that fits your internal needs. And then obviously the ability to ensure compliance, whether that's DGIS, international shipping, or other types of compliance. and then the ability to monitor your shipping performance, through analytics and reporting as well. This diagram just kind of shows you a quick illustration of how the product is configured. So we have Composer, which is our user interface layer, and that interacts with logistics server, which is really where all the business rules and the carrier logic, the DG logic would sit. Organizations can use our user interface. You can create your own, or you can just, depending on your scale, if you want to just call our APIs directly, everything that we can do through the user interface, you can do through a collection of APIs, so that we can plug it into, essentially any workflow that you guys have. The hubcap is an Internet of Things technology which allows for a couple of things. So we have a hubcap peripheral agent that allows us to communicate with printers, scales, dimensioners, etc., as well as a hubcap data agent, which allows us to flexibly integrate basically to any data source. So we can do anything from a flat CSV file all the way up to, SQL Server, Oracle integration, and that type of thing. So in order to bring information into and out of our cloud environment from systems that are behind your firewall, be that your warehouse management system or an inventory management system, all the way back through full ERP. So I think the important piece around the TransStream Label Master relationship here is that there's a fully integrated platform that allows you to streamline the full Hazmat and DGIS workflow. Obviously, by streamlining it, we're also looking to error-proof the shipping and dangerous goods compliance. And then you'll see in a quick demo the ability to automate and normalize the workflow. So the idea there is that we're trying to reduce the number of exception stations and exception processes in your shipping organization to maximize efficiency and productivity. So our system is built with a series of different what we call apps, and essentially these are just prepackaged workflows. I'll show you a couple today. Our primary workflow is typically around what we'd call a warehouse app, and you would see this deployed in traditional warehouse, distribution center, manufacturing environment, where you have kind of seasoned professional shippers. And then we also have a desktop app. And the desktop app is generally used for a couple of scenarios. We'll see this for what we would typically call non-revenue-based shipping. I see this a lot in pharmaceuticals or life sciences, where they're doing research samples and things like that. So somebody will create a shipment at their desk. It needs to go to dangerous goods compliance officer or something to get a final approval. Once it's approved and everything's in the system properly, then it can come back and actually generate a shipping label and all the documentation that's required. With that, I've got a couple of use cases I was going to go through today. Primarily, we see a lot of items around things like dry ice and lithium battery, and then just going to give you a kind of a quick overview of how TransStream communicates with DGIS in the workflow. So bear with me. Let me get. Let's start here. I'm just going to refresh these screens because they probably timed out. All right, so this is kind of our standard warehouse app. Again, this is basically just HTML, so it's really easy to be modified. If you guys want to personalize it yourselves. I'm going to do a couple of shipments here just to kind of show the standardization. So in this case, I've just got a standard domestic small parcel shipment. All I have to do is import the order. We're going out through Hubcap and integrating back to some sort of source application, bringing in all the required information to create the shipping label. And in this case, it happened to be just a standard overnight shipment. So the next item comes down the line, and I scan the barcode off my pick list, and it happens to be an international shipment. So as a shipping operator, it doesn't really matter to me, right? I'm scanning a barcode, I hit the ship button, and at this point, it generates my shipping label along with my commercial invoice and any type of supporting documents. If I need to create a NAFTA document, anything like that. And of course, the next shipment comes down the line. It happens to be a freight shipment. So this is a LTL. We're able to recognize that by the weight and dimensions. In this case, I want to go rate shop it and see what's the best method to ship this one. That could have been predetermined and passed in. So I don't have that one set up here today on my demo, but you could go rate shop that and select a carrier and then generate your bill lading. So the next one that comes down the line happens to be ice cream. So in this case, I know I need to pack it with dry ice. So that is predetermined in the system, or you can manually go in and enter a dry ice weight. In this case, we've already got it populated. So all I have to do is hit ship. And now I get a label. And you'll notice here, if I zoom in a little bit, you can see I've got ice, and I'm passing all the information to FedEx to handle this dry ice shipment of 5 pounds. All right. Next shipment comes down the line, and this one happens to have cell phone batteries. So in this case, I've got my cell phone battery. You'll see in the special services, I've already set some of the standards around the lithium battery. So it's lithium ion, it's packed with the equipment. And again, at this point, all I have to do is hit ship, and I'm going to get a carrier label indicating that it's a lithium battery. That's here, ELB. And I'm also going to get any documentation that's required. All right. So changing the workflow just a little bit, if I move over to a desktop, you can see how this could be used a little bit differently. So it's the same product with just a different user interface. This is called our desktop workflow. We've got different options here that you can either create a requisition that would need to go to someone else for approval, or I can rate shop it and create a rec, or I can enable certain people to do a shipment. They may be able to do their standard shipments and just generate a label at their desk, but if it's got hazardous items on it, then it would need to go through an approval, and it only allows them to generate a shipment request. So I'm going to do a shipment request. In this case, I can go pull my address from an address book. I can type one on the fly and add it to the address book if I'd like. So I'm going to have a 20-pound shipment, and I want to add an item to this. So I'm going to go look in my product table. In this case, I just have one item configured. You'll notice that we've got the standard information around the UN classification, some of the label codes, etc. again, kind of gives an acknowledgement and a disclaimer of, it's really up to the customer to be compliant and all the things that they need to do there. These messages could be personalized based on your workflows as well. And at this point, if I want to do cost center chargebacks and things like that, I can, but I'm just going to go generate a ship request. So essentially, a ship request is of just a barcoded document that would ride down with the shipment, potentially to a packing center or to my DGIS compliance officer. And they're going to have this app. So they're going to log in here. They're going to scan that barcode. In this case, I've got this shipment 11052. This is the one I just did. So FedEx is not playing well with me today. I'm sorry. So that's what's causing that. All right. So at this point, I can do a couple of different things. I can go look up that item. So I know it's got a dangerous goods item. I can go back to my product table, get information about it. And then I can also do my DGIS lookup. So at this point, we're going to actually go out to DGIS. I can type in the UN number or part of it, in this case 1710. That identifies the item. And I can add that material. If I had additional items, I could do that there. And then down here is all of the detail that we're bringing back from DGIS. So this would be all the relevant information that's required in order to process the shipment. And then at this point, you'd be able to go ahead and move it all the way through, generate your final label. We could have a pop-up that showed what label attachments and things. The information is being fed back from DGIS with the item preview, and how to apply the labels would all come at that point. All right, so that's really what I had hoped to cover from the demo side of it. At this point, we'll just move it over to Scott for any questions.
Yeah. Great, thanks, Mike. Brian, that was very helpful. I had a couple of questions that came in during the course of the presentation. Is there any special integration to process DG shipments? How does DGIS and DGIS and TransStream connect? Not sure who's best to answer that, Mike or Brian.
Yeah, so yeah, we do have a direct connection, from our cloud into the DGIS system. I'm not for sure, quite honestly, the technical integration behind the scenes, but I'll be glad to reach out and get some more details on that.
Here's another question here. How do you handle carrier variations? For example, UPS 8-part form.
Yeah, so when you're setting up the carriers, we typically will do a direct carrier integration to an API, and those rules would be documented by the carrier and then automatically controlled in the system. And then when we set up a carrier, if there are any special forms like that that are required, that would be part of the carrier onboarding as we're configuring each of those carriers in the system. So again, I'd be glad to show a more detailed kind of technical view of how we do the setup. But yeah, all that's controlled through the application.
And all the carrier variations are constantly updated as they make changes. Those are integrated into the Label Master DGIS system.
Great. What's that? I mean, we saw, Mike, you showed the more complicated one where there was a workflow with approvals and that kind of thing. How long does it typically take to set everything up? Getting Label Master's DGIS system running inside TransStream.
I would say that the typical process for us is we're going to come in and sit down and do what we call a blueprint workshop, whether that's on premise or kind of virtually, to identify. We'll go through our standard workflows to see if any of those work for the customer. What needs to be personalized in those workflows, if possible, and then we'll provide some sort of upfront pricing and quotation. From there, our typical installs could be anywhere from just a couple of weeks to several months. And for some of our very large multinational kind of global rollouts, those could follow a project plan that delivers over a period of 6 months to 12 months. But that would be dependent on the customer, how they want to roll it out in the different parts of the globe, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Great. That, I believe, is all the questions that we have that have come in from the audience. So I think we can safely wrap up. Once again, thanks to everyone for joining us today. If you'd like us to take a look at your shipping practices and how you're handling dangerous goods and do a more in-depth assessment, we'd be happy to accommodate that. Our contact information is on the screen now. Don't hesitate to reach out. And as we mentioned earlier, the recorded webinar will be made available to you on demand. Thanks again for joining us today, and keep checking your inbox for upcoming parcel performance webinars in the future. Thanks very much. Have a wonderful day.